everyone. Yeah, so this video is kind of a fusion between sort of getting to know a bit more about me, but also there's some creative tips in there as well. So, in case you missed the quote at the start, this was this was inspired by a couple of people. So, first of all, big thank you to Mark Stokes, aka Crash Pow on Twitter, and he hosts Gabfest 2023, which if you want to learn more about indie creators, is really good because he asks some really interesting questions. So I'll have to remember to include a link to his account there. And the other person was Susie Gander, who gave me some really good feedback after we didn't hit the target for the Kickstarter. And part of that was kind of more personal videos, kind of talking about sort of why, Round City is important to me, which, I kind of hope so. I think there is going to be more, like, specifically to do with the comic soon. So there is going to be one on AK Girl, there is going to be one on Wonder Vixen, and obviously if anyone has any other ideas in between, we can talk about other things as well. But this one is more to do with my own personal background, but equally how I think this can apply to you and your own projects as well. So it was quite funny because it was something I hadn't really thought about in a while. And like I said, it was through this kind of Gabfest thing where he was asking questions, and at one point he just tweets to me and says, were you involved in theatre? And the weird thing was, he was absolutely right, and it was something I had never thought about, but actually for the longest time I've been involved with amateur theatre. I should be a bit more precise in saying. So it started off around about middle school, where not only did I sort of appear in things, but I also I wrote, like, they had like a little, like, anthology. I think it was like a Christmas show, and I wrote a story about a guy who's, like, mistaken for Father Christmas, and these kids are like, oh my god, it's actually Father Christmas, and it isn't, and they're kidnapped by robbers. And I can't remember, like, how it went, but it was kind of silly, but I had fun doing it, and that was really cool. I mean, I remember seeing, like, my sister in high school was in Julius Caesar. I remember my only memory of it is that, like, they were, like, spinning around poles and stuff, and I remember feeling it very exciting. And then in high school I was part of a drama group called the Jongleurs, and I did a few interesting things with them. I think one of them I did, like, there was one, like, original play they did by someone who, like, wrote an episode of Casualty once about an American that wanted to take over a chocolate factory, and I played the American, which was fun, like, getting to be just ludicrous and over the top. Actually, like, so yeah, that was I was sort of doing a weird Bill Clinton impression. My memory's fuzzy on that, and yeah, so I really enjoyed doing that. And then at university, I did a few things. Like, I was involved with a couple of groups. So there was one where I did a parody. There was, like, they did kind of a few parody things. So there's one where they did a parody of Scooby-Doo, and I sort of played the sort of Peter Lorre like henchman character. And there was one gag involving a candlestick, which I'll leave to your imagination. I also got to appear briefly in Little Shop of Horrors. So I did the guy that sort of comes on and goes, oh, what an unusual plan. And again, for some reason I decided to do it in the style of the rich Texan from The Simpsons. Actually, I think it might have been before that character existed, but it was just ridiculous. And again, just ridiculous and over the top, and I'm not even going to do it because it's just rubbish. But, I enjoyed it, and I think that was fun. And then a few years pass, and then my friend Dan, he created the UEA Headlights Comedy Society alongside another friend, Paul McNaughton, which was really, Daniel Taylor, Paul McNaughton, should use full names really, and it was really cool because we would kind of split it between improv and creating sketches like week to week, and it was great kind of seeing people get involved and develop and become more confident, and it was just great to see. And what was really cool was we got to do shows where we would support like established sketch people, and that was really cool, and I had a really good time with that. And there was also Daniel also established the Intellectual Hooligans. I think to the best of my knowledge both of them are still going, which is awesome. And again, that was a really good improv troupe, and again, really cool top stuff there. So that's really awesome. And yeah, I think so. Asking like, what does that pertain to Reynard City, and how did that kind of work for us? I would say, I think in terms of sort of self-confidence, I think sort of doing theatre from a young age is really good, because you sort of develop a bit more as a person, and you sort of learn to kind of work with people a bit more. And I think it's kind of tricky, because I do think I was a little bit well, yeah, a bit over the top, and a bit kind of like trying to get attention, and I think you have to kind of learn to be part of a group, and I think over time that has become part of the comic, which is, yes, this is my idea, but it doesn't exist without the people who can draw. It doesn't exist without the people who can do voice acting. I mean, again, like another thing that we were involved in, did a bit of Shakespeare with the Sewell Barnes. So I think it was one thing, I think it was Measure for Measure, which again did with Daniel, and that was awesome, and very intense. That's the strange thing, like, people use the term like sort of amateur as a knock, but my goodness, like amateur theatre, like often it's crazy intense. And like I remember I originally had like 2 parts, and it got like bumped to 1 because I missed 1 rehearsal. Like, they were strict, and to be fair to them, I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. Oh, I had to laugh because like my older brother Ben, like he went with my mum. He's like, "That's the first time I've seen you actually act." And I remember like the director was like, I think I did like a little bit of like an eye roll, because I was playing this character called the Sexton, who in effect was like a Shakespearean lawyer type character, and I was reacting to Daniel. I'm trying to think who else it was, and there was like, they were playing like in effect sort of comic relief characters, and I was just, you know, sort of the straight man, sort of having to react to their tomfoolery, and it was great. It was really cool, and I met a lot of really cool people who subsequently did voice work for us, which was really awesome. I think some of them, you know, are still part of the group, which is fantastic. And yeah, and that also happened through Stagger, the gangster film, where I was, like I said, I played the brother of the main character, and again met some awesome people through that as well. So yeah, I think yeah, so there's been sort of direct benefits, but there's also been, I think, in terms of learning to work with people, I think learning how to develop a creative project, learning how to direct people. I mean, it's something that I've had to learn over time. And obviously, you still keep going, and you still learn, like, with each time you do an issue, with each time you work with a different person, you learn more and more each time, and you're not always going to get it right. But I would say, like, theatre's been really good for that. I think it is also good in terms of learning dialogue. I think it's also in terms of sort of thinking, like, your kind of intimacy with an audience, because I think one of the benefits of theatre is the fact that you're so sort of close up with someone. So, for example, most recently we went to see Garth Marenghi Terratome. So he was like the writer character from Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, and the Q&A he did, and I was kind of brought in as a moderator for a little bit, and oh my goodness, like when you're with someone who's like a former Footlights performer, and oh my god, they just run rings around you. They're so good and so sharp, and like there was like one bit where I was like sort of playing along with him. It was like, oh, you're on top of this, and just, oh, you missed that person, and it's like, it's so sharp and just funny as heck. And again, it's like another thing to learn from and another thing to sort of develop from. So there's that, and there's also a few exercises, so I'm going to talk about them, and I think for this one I might do a blog sort of explaining a couple of these things, because I think they might need a little bit more explanation. But here's going to be a couple of things that you can apply to your own work and your own projects. Okay. Right, so why do I think theatre, and I think improv especially, but I will broaden it to theatre, can benefit your writing. So first of all, I think, again, taking classes I think is good for self-confidence, because I do think with writing there is an element of ego in there. I think you do need a bit of it in order to sort of fight past that kind of insecurity of, oh, you know, am I good enough to write this, or can I write this? And the answer is yes, you can. Get the writing done, you can do it. Like, that's the thing. Yeah, just, you see a lot of these kind of things with people sort of being all kind of scared in themselves, and it's like, you've got it in you. You can do this, and just get it down. And I think the immediacy, I think, being involved in, say, like theatre or improv, I think it does help to kind of cut that logical side of the brain. And obviously that logical side is important, especially in the sort of editing and redrafting phase, because you need to be able to break stuff down, you need to be able to sort of look at what you're writing and whether it works, you need to be able to take on feedback and then sort of apply it to what you're writing. So it's not that like logic doesn't have a place in it. Obviously it's very important, but I would say especially in the first draft phase when you're actually working to get stuff done, I think you do have to sort of deal with that slight kind of fear factor. You know, don't worry about what people think, don't worry about the audience and all this other stuff. That can exist for later. That can exist when you're redrafting. That can exist when you're talking with someone about marketing your book. Those things, in my opinion, and to be honest, this is why I personally enjoy the first draft, because I like the freedom of just getting it down, seeing where it takes you, and sometimes being very surprised where it goes. And improv is very good for that because, one, it's about kind of being receptive to ideas, but also in terms of developing. So there's this idea of yes and in improv. So this idea of you have a concept, and then the and is kind of where you develop it further. So, for example, once upon a time is a good sort of starting point. Once upon a time, yes, and you know what happens after the once upon a time. Oh, they lived in a place where, you know, everyone was addicted to strawberries, and there was a wizard who wanted to break this terrible addiction that was, you know, harming the kingdom. Yes, and they met this person, blah 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 blah. You know, you can take that as far as you want. But that's another one. I mean, another good kind of improv idea is the idea of status. So the idea of what status are your characters. So, for example, if you've got a character who's very powerful, you know, they'd be a 10. And then if you've got a character who's very weak, they'd be a 1. So let's keep it simple and let's say king, servant. Now, what is this king like? What are their personality traits? What is this servant like? It could be that because the king is in this position, they are very confident, they know what they want, they are terrible. I mean, they could be lovely, either way, but they have this elevated position and that affects how they perceive the world. And likewise, the servant at the bottom, they might be the most loyal person, they might be really cool and do everything they can because they believe in the king. Or it could be the other way around and they resent this person because they are right at the bottom and they are being treated like crud and they don't enjoy it. You can explore these things, especially, like I say, if you haven't formulated your characters yet. Now, of course, with status, the fun thing we can do with this exercise is what happens if we flip it round? What happens if, you know, through some kind of magic, again, Wizard did it, they flip roles. So what happens when the downtrodden person becomes king? What happens when the king becomes the downtrodden person? Do they learn from each other? Do they repeat the same mistakes? There are things you can do with this. Another fun thing you can do. So we've mentioned before the exercise of like interviewing your characters or putting them in different scenarios. Like that's a common improv one. Another one I really enjoy is one called genre roller coaster. So, say for example, you've got a block. You don't want to write your story for a bit. You're fed up. It happens. That's fine. Have a little fun. Like do a little scene of what if your story was a western? What if your story was a horror? What if your story was a musical? Have a bit of fun with it, and then maybe it will rejuvenate it. Maybe it won't. And I think as well, I think attending an improv class, I think it's a good way of kind of opening yourself out. I think it's a good way of, especially I think if you're going to do a collaborative project, learning to work with other people, I think that's very beneficial. I think in terms of, the wider thing with theatre, I think, the fact that you're in this space, so if you want to work on a comic, so obviously you've got a limited space when it comes to the panels on the page. Likewise, if you think of the panels on the page as a stage, well, that rhymes. How about that? If you do that, if you put those things into your head, you can then have a better idea of, I've only got so much room for dialogue, I've only got so much room for visuals, what can I do to get the most from this? And of course the great thing is if you watch a play, you can get a sense of, when people are kind of close together, when people are far apart, like how you would position things. So there's benefits there, I would argue, as well. So that's a very broad thing. And also, I know what some people might be thinking right now, like, oh, but I don't have the money to, like, go to a big West End show. It's like, well, you don't have to. You can go to an amateur show. You can go to any number of things. There are often, like, free performances. There are often festivals. There are lots of things you can go to where you will get the benefit of seeing this. Or, or to be honest, watch clips online of these things just to get an idea. Like, I'll have to find the video, but like hearing Keegan-Michael Key, for example, talking about improv, really useful, really like worth remembering, because I think the thing is, there is a danger that we only get influence from things that are directly related to the thing that we want to see. And don't get me wrong, that is important. It's important to sort of know a genre and where it comes from, but equally it helps to know some other things too. You can play a bit with it as well. So anyway, I think that pretty much covers what I want to say, barring one more thing. Bicky for anyone who gets that reference. Not an actual Bicky, like a metaphorical one. I'm sorry. Yeah, one more thing. We will talk about issue 6 just after this. Alright, so before we wrap this up, I just wanted to quickly talk about issue 6, because I know there will be some people asking questions about this, and obviously it's relevant, and we're going to quickly go over this just before we give you a couple of quick sneak previews. So the idea is we are putting this all together, and like issue 5, there's going to be a few different stories that put the whole thing together. And there's going to be, in effect, I say side stories, they're still really good and important. So there's one by Emily Vandercook called Switching Sides, which is going to be a lot of fun. And there's one called Welcome to My World by Blue Ike, who also is going to, I say going to be working, is working on issue 7. And for obvious reasons, I'm not going to be sharing issue 7 pages before issue 6 is done, because there is a plot point that I can't sort of share past a certain point, which also means when it comes to the previews that we're sharing on Patreon, Ko-fi, DeviantArt, etc., there will come a point where there will be a cut-off point and there will be certain pages that I'm not going to show. And it's not that, I don't trust you, because of course I do. It's, I want to keep the surprise. There's the old Hitchcock line, don't give away the ending, it's the only one we've got. And I think some people, who have read like the short stories will know about this, and my request is that you don't post spoilers. Any spoiler comments I see will be deleted. Like that's your warning. That is your one and only warning. And equally, I've had this before with people saying, "Oh, you deleted my comment." And it's like, if I delete a comment, there's a valid reason. I don't want to have to go in it. Also, because sometimes it'll happen, and the person will sort of reply like long after I've done it, so I can't even remember what the context was. But like, if I do, I've got a reason for it. I don't want to have to. But like, as I say, it's something just to let you know. So, a quick rundown of what issue 6 is. So, essentially, from issue 5, we had this whole big sort of alien invasion story, and it all got a bit mental. And then Guillermo decides, right, I've had enough of Megafox, and I am going to end this once and for all. There's a little bit more to it than that, but again, I don't really want to spoil issue 5, so you kind of have to read that for the full context. And of course, in this kind of story, a very valid question was, well, why don't Vimes and Sal stop him? And the answer is that Megafox sees them coming, and a sort of trap is put in place to kind of keep them from getting to him. And it essentially becomes a race to kind of stop him from doing something really stupid. And, you know, where it goes from here sets up the final. So we've been talking about the final arc for a while now, and essentially the end of issue 6 kicks this off. So issue 6 in effect is the end point for the second arc, which started with issue 4. So yeah, it's kind of this moment, and it's like this then becomes like a catalyst for a bigger thing, and it will make more sense, I promise you, but I really don't want to say much more than this. I really don't, and I hope you enjoy it. And I think it is just something that I've been working on, and I've been hoping to get out there for years and years, and I'm really chuffed with the work that everyone's put into it. I think Emily Blue Ike's work is terrific. I think Eddie's work is great. We're still working on how we're going to do the final 2 parts, so there's going to be an update on that, but that will be nearer the time, as again after we've kind of got everything put together. So enjoy these last couple of quick sneak previews before we do the end credits. And again, massive thank you to everyone who has supported us, because obviously we didn't hit the Kickstarter target, but we did still get, you know, people sort of backing us from Ko-fi, commissions, you know, getting the comics and things. So please keep that up, because that is absolutely amazing, and I'm really grateful that people sort of, they reached out to me and said, is there other ways we can support? So, you know, that's something, you know, links will be in the description. So anyway, I think that kind of covers everything. If you've got any questions, please comment them below. As I said before, please no spoiler questions. Like that's the only like that's the thing. Just kind of obviously sort of please be polite, and please no spoiler questions. Much love. Bye.